Callista Montgomery opened her eyes to the sight of a high, ornate ceiling lit by gentle morning sunlight. A moment passed before she realized she was not in her own bedroom, and the realization sparked instant confusion. She lay on crisp white sheets that felt far too luxurious for her modest lifestyle, and when she sat up, she saw an endless wall of windows revealing a breathtaking Manhattan skyline. Panic fluttered through her chest. This definitely wasn't her humble studio apartment. Her heart pounded harder as she looked down and discovered that the only thing covering her body was a pristine men's dress shirt, a few sizes too large, reaching down to mid-thigh, and nothing else. She had no clue how she had ended up in such a compromising state. With cautious steps, she left the plush bed and ventured into the spacious living area. The apartment seemed more like a penthouse suite from an architectural magazine than an ordinary residence. Floor-to-ceiling glass panels stretched across one wall, offering a dizzying view of skyscrapers and a dazzling slice of the Hudson River. Sleek, modern furniture and original artwork hinted at immense wealth, and a glossy black grand piano occupied one corner, its lid propped open like it had played soft music into the night. Every detail told Callista she had awakened in a world she did not belong to, a place owned by someone with power, money, and all the trappings of success. She felt a tremor of embarrassment as she tugged on the hem of the shirt, wishing she had a belt or a robe. Anxious questions gnawed at her. Had she drunkenly stumbled into a stranger's home? Worse yet, had something been slipped into her drink at the company event last night? Shadows of memory flickered in her mind, a vibrant party at Bishop and Hayes, the swirl of champagne and expensive perfumes, a distinct smell of cologne, and then a sudden wave of dizziness. It all blurred together like a half-remembered dream. Before she could recall more, the low rumble of footsteps made her spin around. A tall, dark-haired man entered the room, dressed in a tailored suit without a tie. His jaw was strong, his features sharp, and although he carried himself with the confidence of a man used to giving orders, his eyes betrayed a hint of fatigue. He paused at the threshold, concern clouding his face when he noticed her anxious posture. "You're awake," he said softly, voice echoing with calm authority that didn't match her wild panic. "I'm Remington Beckett. You, probably have questions." Callista bit her lip, hugging herself in the too big shirt. The name struck a chord in her memory. Remington Beckett was the newly appointed CEO at Bishop and Hayes, where she had hoped to pitch her latest design ideas the night before. She had seen him only from a distance, a compelling figure who seemed almost untouchable in his crisp suits. Now here he was, speaking to her as though it were the most normal thing in the world that she had woken up in his penthouse. Confusion and relief tangled inside her, vying for dominance. Part of her wanted to run, while another part sensed a gentleness in his gaze that quieted her fear. One question pressed on her mind with alarming weight: what on earth had happened at that party to bring her here? She swallowed hard and braced herself to find out. Callista's mind teemed with questions as she stood there, hugging the oversized shirt around her body. Remington Beckett calmly poured steaming coffee into a slender mug on a minimalist marble table, then gestured for her to sit on the nearby couch. At first, she hesitated, her pulse still raced, and her cheeks burned with lingering embarrassment, but the promise of answers urged her to obey. Carefully, she settled onto a cushion, trying her best to appear composed despite her disheveled state. Remington pulled up a sleek armchair, positioning himself so as not to loom over her. He handed her the coffee, which she took with trembling fingers, then folded his hands and leveled his gaze at her. "First of all, I'm glad you're all right," he said quietly. "You had me worried last night." His words carried a gentle earnestness that took her by surprise. How could the CEO of a massive corporation be so at ease, sitting just a few feet away from her, wearing an expression that was more relief than intimidation? She sipped the coffee, rich and fragrant, and the warmth coursing through her veins lent her a shred of courage. I don't remember much," she admitted. "I know I was at the Bishop and Hayes event, hoping to pitch my design portfolio. I remember glimpses of the party, fancy suits, a clinking of glasses. Then it's all hazy." She paused, glancing down at the mug. But waking up here, in your penthouse, wearing nothing but your shirt, it's terrifying. Did something happen to me? The corners of Remington's mouth tightened as though he were bracing for the revelation that might alarm her further. You collapsed at the reception, he explained, each word measured, as if he were trying to ensure she didn't take it the wrong way. One moment, you seemed fine, talking to a few executives. The next thing I knew, you were stumbling and nearly fainted. I caught you before you hit the ground. You kept insisting that you just needed air, but your speech was slurred, and you looked disoriented. I feared someone might have slipped something into your drink. Callista's breath caught. So her suspicions had some foundation. That means I was drugged. It's possible, he said with a hint of regret. I wanted to take you to a hospital, but you didn't want that. You were adamant you'd be fine if you could rest a bit. You were shaking, though, and not entirely coherent. I didn't feel safe letting you leave on your own. So I brought you here. My driver and I tried to keep things discreet. By the time we arrived, your clothes, he cleared his throat. Let's just say they were in pretty bad shape. You had spilled a drink, maybe two, while you were weaving through the crowd. They were stained and reeked of alcohol. I gave you my shirt so you'd be more comfortable. Embarrassment prickled at her skin. The mental image of him stripping her out of a ruined cocktail dress into a crisp men's shirt brought up a swirl of conflicting emotions, gratitude, mortification, and an odd flicker of comfort. She studied his face, hoping to glean any sign of ulterior motive, but she found only a quiet sincerity. Thank you, she finally whispered, her voice thick with unspent tension. For taking care of me. If I was drugged, it means someone targeted me. That's what I'm concerned about, Remington admitted. He placed his elbows on his knees, clasping his fingers together. I may be CEO, but I've only recently stepped into the role. Bishop and Hayes has been going through internal shakeups, and not everyone is pleased with the new direction. Last night's event was meant to foster goodwill among investors, but it appears some people had darker agendas. Maybe you saw something, overheard something. Or maybe they simply chose you at random, an easy mark. A knot formed in Callista's stomach, a mix of fear and anger. She remembered fleeting glimpses, a pair of men in hushed conversation near the corner of the banquet hall, the words embezzlement and cover-up drifting to her ears before she'd walked away. Had that snippet of knowledge put her in danger? I might have overheard something. But I'm not sure, she confessed, forcing the memory to the forefront. I was at the bar when I heard two guys talking about some shady financial dealings. Something about large sums routed through dummy accounts. But I couldn't see them clearly. It was crowded, and the music was loud. Remington's eyes flickered with concern. That might be the reason. If they thought you heard enough to blow the whistle, they might have panicked. Her throat tightened. The possibility that she'd become a target, just for accidentally eavesdropping, sent a fresh wave of dread through her. So what now? I can't just go home and pretend nothing happened. The moment I step outside, I could be at risk. He nodded, unflinching. I won't let that happen. For now, you're safe here, and I want to keep it that way until we figure out exactly who's behind this. We'll see a doctor if you need it, ensure there are no lasting effects of the drug. He glanced toward the penthouse's vast windows. But I can't deny that the situation is delicate. If these people are bold enough to slip you a drug at a high-profile event, they won't hesitate to try something else. Anxiety pressed down on her like a physical weight. She stared at him, unsure whether to trust the sudden protectiveness of a man she barely knew. Yet despite the strangeness of the situation, she sensed an undercurrent of honesty in him. She could see it in the tension at the corners of his mouth, in the way his gaze flicked over her to make sure she was all right, and in his measured calm, like he took her safety personally. I don't have anywhere else to go, Callista admitted, her voice shaking slightly. If it's true that I was targeted because of something I heard or saw, I need help. I can't handle this alone. Remington straightened, a quiet determination edging his features. Then I'll help you. We'll get to the bottom of it. But you should know that doing so might set off more alarms internally. There's a reason these people felt safe enough to act at a company event. They're entrenched, and they'll cover their tracks if we aren't careful. She nodded, inhaling a shaky breath, trying to find some semblance of composure. All right. I'll stay. At least until we figure out who's behind this. Her lips curved in a faint, unsure smile. But, I can't keep wearing your shirt forever. A light chuckle escaped him, diffusing some of the tension. I'll have my driver pick up some proper clothes in your size. In the meantime, please, treat this place as if it were your own. You've had an awful shock, and I can't promise it's over yet. But I promise I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Callista cradled the coffee mug, letting its warmth sink into her palms. She felt an odd sense of relief flutter in her chest, mingling with lingering anxiety. Everything about her life had changed overnight, throwing her into a surreal alliance with a man of immense power, wealth, and secrets. She gazed around the sunlit penthouse, the shimmering marble floors, the sleek decor, and realized that as daunting as her predicament was, she no longer faced it alone. Callista spent the better part of the morning trying to steady her nerves, sipping more coffee than she normally would have in a week. Every so often, she would drift to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stare out at the Manhattan skyline, attempting to ground herself by focusing on the bustle of the city below. How was it possible that yesterday she had been a hopeful designer with a chance to impress a major corporation, and now she was effectively a refugee in the CEO's penthouse, afraid to walk out the door? The surreal nature of her predicament made her feel lightheaded, so she clung to the one constant in this whirlwind, Remington Beckett's calm voice promising that they would uncover whoever had targeted her. By mid-morning, Remington had concluded a round of phone calls to select members of his staff. Callista overheard him speaking in clipped, business-like tones, dropping hints that he was suspending certain internal activities, reassigning security protocols, and demanding that no mention be made of the incident at last night's event. While he never explicitly referenced her name, she sensed a certain urgency in his words, and the occasional frown creasing his brow spoke volumes. By the time he ended the final call, she could tell from his expression that this matter was larger than some random misdeed or petty corporate sabotage. Someone was leveraging the company's resources, and they either had allies in high places or tremendous cunning, or both. He rejoined her in the spacious living area, where she perched on the edge of a velvet chaise lounge, clutching her mug. She managed a timid smile. So what happens next? Her voice wavered, betraying the undercurrent of fear she couldn't quite hide. Remington settled into a modern armchair opposite her. The penthouse, for all its grandeur, felt strangely intimate in that moment, just two people, quietly working to solve a dangerous puzzle. My driver picked up a few outfits for you, he began, his tone gentle. They're in the bedroom closet if you want to change. As for the bigger picture, I've arranged for additional security, but I don't want to draw too much attention. Whoever orchestrated what happened last night might panic if they realize we're onto them. Her chest tightened. But don't they already know you brought me here? A flash of concern crossed his face. They may suspect, but I made sure your exit from the event was discreet. No one saw you leave with me except a few of my most trusted employees. It's possible they think you just vanished into the night, or worse. For now, that uncertainty might give us a small advantage. She nodded slowly, the realization sinking in that her best protection was this penthouse, and the secrecy surrounding her presence in it. But as grateful as she was to be safe from any immediate threat, she chafed at the idea of hiding indefinitely. I can't hide forever, she murmured, voicing her thoughts. I have a life out there, my apartment, my projects, everything. And we still don't know exactly who drugged me or why. Remington's jaw tightened. I have some theories, he replied. Before taking over as CEO, I conducted a quiet audit of Bishop and Hayes. Certain numbers didn't match up, particularly in our philanthropic and research branches. I'd begun suspecting embezzlement or illegal transfers, but I hadn't pinned down the culprits. Now I fear you might have stumbled onto evidence, or at least become aware of it, inadvertently. If these people felt threatened enough to silence you, we're dealing with serious criminals. This isn't just the typical office politics. A chill prickled at the back of her neck. The memory of that overheard conversation at the gala flickered anew, murmurings of under-the-table deals, shell accounts, and no one's going to notice a few million missing. She swallowed. I heard something along those lines at the party, but I couldn't make out the faces. If they realized I heard them, that might explain everything. He nodded, wearing the grave look of a man who understood too well the precarious game in which they were now pawns. We need hard proof, he said. Not just your recollection or my suspicions, but real documentation. I've already started a covert investigation with a few trusted staff members, but it's slow going. Meanwhile, if the people behind this sense were close to exposing them, they'll try again, maybe more aggressively. For a moment, neither of them spoke, tension filling the air. Callista reflected on how drastically her world had shifted. She wasn't even sure if her design portfolio mattered anymore, not when her very life was under threat. She yearned for simpler concerns, deadlines, color palettes, feedback from potential clients. Instead, she was unraveling a major corporate conspiracy in an opulent penthouse, guided by a CEO who turned into her de facto protector. She released a shaky breath. What can I do to help? He studied her, a flicker of admiration touching his features. You're remarkably brave, he said softly. Most would be paralyzed by fear in this situation. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We could start by trying to pinpoint who might have approached you last night. You said you were near the bar. Perhaps the bartender saw something. Maybe you remember any distinct voices or mannerisms from the men you overheard. He gave her a fleeting smile. Between your recollections and my contacts, we might narrow down the suspects. Callista set her mug aside and squared her shoulders. All right. Let's do it. My memory is fuzzy, but I'll give it my best shot. She began to recount every detail she could recall from the event, no matter how small, the type of music playing when she overheard the men, the approximate time she visited the bar, the vague silhouette of the man who might have brushed by her right before she felt dizzy. As she spoke, Remington took notes on a tablet, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Every time she dredged up a new piece of the puzzle, her fear mingled with a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim anymore, she was a key witness, maybe even the tipping point that could expose a massive crime. A part of her still quivered in anxiety, but another part clung to the idea that if she could stop these criminals, no one else would suffer what she had. Near the end of her recollections, Remington's phone buzzed on a nearby console. He glanced at the screen, then rose to answer in the corner of the room, his voice dropping to a low murmur. She couldn't make out the words, but the tension in his posture set her nerves on edge. When he ended the call, he turned back to her, brow furrowed. That was one of my internal auditors, he explained. She found irregularities in the logging system from last night's event. Security footage has been tampered with. Certain time stamps and angles are missing. Specifically around the time you were last seen near the bar. Callista's heart sank. So they're already covering their tracks. He nodded grimly. Which means they have enough power or influence to manipulate official Bishop and Hayes records without my knowledge. That implies someone fairly high up or with strong technical connections. It also means they didn't want evidence of how you ended up drugged. She pressed a hand to her temple, fighting a fresh swell of worry. We're dealing with people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. They're thorough. Then she forced a steadier tone. But we're not backing down, right? Remington's gaze burned with resolve. Never. I've put in a request for the raw server backups, footage the saboteur might not know exists. My team is combing through them now. If any accidental file was missed, we might catch a glimpse of your assailant. The determined set of his jaw gave Callista a strange sense of reassurance. He was in this fight, not merely for corporate reasons, but also because he truly cared about her safety. She allowed herself a fleeting smile. Thank you. For all of this. You didn't have to protect me, but you did. He approached her with careful steps, stopping just shy of arm's length. I couldn't live with myself if I let something terrible happen to you, especially after seeing you collapse in front of me. His voice dipped softer, the underlying intensity more intimate than anything he'd said before. You may think it's just professional duty, but it's become personal. I want you safe. An unexpected warmth flooded Callista's chest. Her lips parted, though she wasn't entirely sure how to respond. The moment held a charge she couldn't fully articulate: gratitude, attraction, and a vulnerability neither had anticipated. Before she could speak, Remington stepped back with a self-conscious dip of his head, clearing his throat. Anyway, he said, the businesslike edge returning to his tone, why don't you pick an outfit from the closet, take a shower, and try to relax while I coordinate with my tech team. We'll keep this line of communication open, and if we learn anything new, I'll let you know immediately. Realizing how quickly her cheeks had warmed, she nodded, grateful for the chance to collect herself. He showed her to the luxurious guest suite, complete with a marble bathroom that looked like it belonged on the pages of a design magazine. Inside the closet, she found a modest yet stylish selection of clothing in her approximate size: blouses, slacks, a casual dress or two, all with their tags still attached. She exhaled shakily, touched by the lengths to which Remington had gone to make her feel at home. As she began to peel off the borrowed shirt, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes shone with a mix of fear and determination. The events of the night before still weighed on her. Someone had set her up to be taken out of the picture. But now she was here, in the protective orbit of the most powerful man at Bishop and Hayes, forging an alliance she never would have imagined. And though the sense of danger lay coiled in her stomach like a serpent, a glimmer of hope took root alongside it. She wasn't alone in this fight, and she wasn't about to let evil men win. Once dressed, she steeled herself for the battles yet to come. Whatever shadows lurked behind the corporate mask of Bishop and Hayes, she and Remington intended to pull them into the light. And beneath the overarching mission to expose fraud and corruption, an undeniable bond was forming, a fragile thread of trust that might prove stronger than fear, if only they could nurture it before the storm broke. When Callista emerged from the guest suite, hair still damp and dressed in fresh clothes, Remington was standing by the massive windows, speaking in a hushed tone into his phone. He glanced over when she appeared, offering a tight smile that barely masked the tension in his eyes. She stepped closer, just in time to hear him end the call with a curt goodbye. He slipped the phone into his pocket and exhaled, jaw set as though he were bracing for another confrontation. Bad news? She asked, wary of adding more stress to his already complicated morning. He hesitated, then nodded. One of my internal auditors found fragments of footage that confirm you were definitely drugged at that event. The cameras caught a man in a dark suit slipping a powder into what looks like your champagne glass, but the moment he turned around, the feed conveniently cut off. We still don't have his face on record, and we're missing the lead-up. Callista folded her arms, trying not to let fear crack her composure. So we know it happened, but not who. That means we're dealing with someone who has enough clout to erase the most incriminating footage. They must have sabotaged the raw backup too, right? That's the likely scenario, Remington agreed, frustration bleeding into his voice. My team is scouring every hidden partition and off-site server we own, hoping something survived. But at best, we might only catch his profile. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the gravity of it sink in. Whoever was behind this had extraordinary reach within Bishop and Hayes, resources that let them tamper with official security protocols. So what's our next step? Remington gestured toward the living area, a silent invitation to follow him. She complied, noticing that he moved with an undercurrent of urgency, his footsteps quick and purposeful. Once they were settled on the plush sofa, he brought up a file on his tablet and handed it to her. Across the screen were lines of financial data, various accounts, dates, wire transfers, all aligned in a meticulous but confusing format. "I've been building a case," he explained. "Since before I officially became CEO, I suspected some kind of embezzlement. Money was disappearing into shell companies disguised as philanthropic ventures or consulting fees. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, but the deeper we dig, the more anomalies we find. Bishop and Hayes has always had robust philanthropy projects, but over the last 2 years, the amounts transferred to these so-called initiatives skyrocketed, without any real evidence of community impact." She frowned, scrolling through the figures. Could those be the same shell companies the men at the gala were discussing? Possibly. He leaned forward, arms on his knees, intense gaze fixed on the screen. "I'm convinced they're connected. You might have overheard them finalizing a new plan, maybe they're using fresh accounts or forging invoices. If they suspected you were listening, that's reason enough to silence you." Callista bit her lip. Anger warred with fear inside her. Anger at whoever had nearly derailed her life, fear at the understanding of how dangerous they truly were. "So your mission is to find evidence that can't be erased or tampered with, right? Something that definitively links these transactions to specific individuals?" He nodded. "Exactly. Once we have a solid link, we can go public, call in an external audit or even the authorities if it's big enough. We can blow this open before they strike again. But we need a smoking gun. These financial criminals are experts at covering their tracks." Her mind buzzed with ideas, spinning back to her old life as a graphic designer who'd often navigated client presentations, websites, and data management systems. "Have you tried cross-referencing the design documents from those philanthropic ventures? Sometimes, ironically, the marketing or promotional material can reveal real oversight. If they're forging numbers but had to produce media or logos, they might have left clues in the metadata." Remington stared at her for a moment, considering. "That's an angle we haven't fully explored. We've been so focused on the finance side, I didn't think about checking marketing collaterals. Maybe they contracted a design team to create banners or pamphlets. The devil could be in the details." She handed back the tablet, a small thrill of purpose coursing through her veins. If her knowledge of design work could help crack this case, and clear her name, she would give it everything she had. "If you can give me access to any marketing materials or design briefs from the philanthropic branch, I might spot something. Dates that don't match the official timeline, anomalies in client sign-offs, hidden references in the layout files. You'd be surprised what I've found in client-provided documents before." A ghost of a smile tugged at Remington's lips. "Callista, you might be our best shot at unraveling this. I'll have my assistant gather everything. But it's going to be a lot. Are you sure you want to dive into this?" She drew a breath, mentally steeling herself. "I need to clear my name, and I need to ensure they can't do this to anyone else. So, yes, I'm sure. Besides, it's safer for me to stay here if they're after me, right?" He gave a grave nod. "For now, definitely. I don't like thinking about what might happen if you set foot outside alone. At least not until we know more. My security detail is on high alert, and I've asked them to monitor the building entrances closely." The realization of her precarious situation pressed on Callista's chest, making it slightly hard to breathe. This penthouse, for all its luxury, was essentially her refuge. She was a guest, but also a captive by circumstance. The windowed walls that provided an opulent view of the city felt like a transparent fortress, magnificent but isolating. Even so, she steeled herself. "Then we'll make good use of the time I'm here. Let's start looking at those documents immediately." He rose, offering his hand to help her stand. A gentlemanly gesture she accepted. The warmth of his fingers curled around hers left her momentarily flustered, a flash of unexpected awareness tensing her stomach. She reminded herself that this was business, yet the tension she sensed in his presence went beyond professional. There was a tenderness in the way he guided her toward a nearby desk, and the faint spark in his eyes hinted at a deeper connection she wasn't sure she was ready to name. They spent the next few hours combing through digital archives, request forms, and PDF files for philanthropic programs with names like Featherline Initiative and Hopeward Horizons. Callista scanned hundreds of images, logos, promotional brochures, event posters, and cross-checked them against official launch dates or approval documents in the financial logs. She caught subtle mismatches, a design with an older date stamp than the official press release, a sponsor's name incorrectly spelled on one set of posters but spelled correctly on the receipts. Each small discrepancy was a puzzle piece hinting that these philanthropic ventures might be shells. Remington jotted notes, correlating them with suspicious money flows. They were building a tapestry of inconsistencies, still inconclusive, but enough to suggest a widespread cover-up. By the time they paused for a late lunch, Callista's head ached from data overload, yet she felt a growing sense of optimism. "We're definitely onto something," she murmured over a plate of delivered gourmet sandwiches. All these logos and brand assets were supposedly finalized months earlier, but there's no record of the actual design process in the corporate timeline. It's like someone backdated them to match a fake narrative. He wiped a stray crumb from the corner of his mouth, looking both tired and exhilarated. "Agreed. If we can tie these findings directly to a specific manager or department, we might be able to crack the whole scheme. My guess is there's a ring of people inside Bishop and Hayes orchestrating multiple sham charities. The question is, how high up does it go?" A chill ran through Callista. "High enough to meddle with security footage and attempt to drug me at a public gala, apparently." She sighed, setting her sandwich aside. "Which means we have to be 10 steps ahead, or they'll bury us." He reached across the glass-topped dining table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was both protective and strangely intimate. "I won't let that happen," he said, voice quiet but resolute. "We'll bring them down. I promise." An unspoken current passed between them, tense yet comforting. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, a bond was forming, and it went beyond mere alliance. She could see it in the warmth of his eyes, feel it in the firmness of his grasp. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose in her throat, gratitude, fear, curiosity about who he was beneath the polished exterior, and an undeniable awareness of the closeness that was growing between them. Abruptly, his phone buzzed from across the table, shattering the moment. He released her hand with a regretful smile and picked up the device. Whatever he saw on the screen made his brow furrow. "I'm needed downstairs at the main lobby. Some urgent matter I can't delegate. Will you be okay here on your own for a bit? My security team is on standby." She nodded, swallowing the sudden flutter of nerves. "Yes. I'll keep digging through the design files. Go handle whatever you need to do." He left with purposeful strides, but not before casting a lingering glance back at her. The door clicked shut, leaving Callista alone in the lofty penthouse. She stared at the lavish surroundings, marble floors, modern art, unobstructed views of the city skyline, and took a steadying breath. In just one day, she'd gone from an aspiring designer at a corporate gala to an accidental detective, unraveling financial crimes alongside the most powerful man at Bishop and Hayes. And strangely enough, amid the chaos and uncertainty, she felt more alive than she had in a long time, like the risk had ignited a courage she never knew she possessed. If she and Remington could persevere, they might save countless people from this corruption. And maybe, just maybe, they would find something else along the way, a spark of hope that transcended the corporate battlefield, a feeling that bordered on true connection in the unlikeliest of places. Callista remained seated at the glass-topped dining table, devoting herself to the sea of digital files. She had to remind herself to blink every so often, her focus so intent that it nearly left her breathless. The penthouse was quiet now that Remington had stepped out, the hush broken only by the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant city sounds that wafted up to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Every new document she opened felt like a potential clue. She quickly identified certain patterns, multiple projects under the same philanthropic umbrella, with logos that looked like half-hearted variations on a theme. Data-laden spreadsheets overlapped with slick promotional brochures that contained anachronistic references, a supposed scholarship fund launched in March, yet the design templates bore metadata that claimed they'd been created in February of the following year. The entire timeline of each project felt suspiciously tangled, more like a cover story hastily arranged after the fact. Eventually, she stumbled across a particularly strange file path, a folder titled Featherline_initiative_archive_temp_old_review. Its name alone made her heart beat faster. There was something uncharacteristically messy about the way it was labeled, as though the person who created it never expected anyone to look there. She clicked in, finding a trove of raw image files, including half-finished mock-ups with random text. In the design industry, this sort of placeholder text was normal, but the files were rife with unusual details, scribbled notes in the margins, lines that read, "Await sign-off from KL" or "Use Alt version if the main design is flagged." KL. She frowned, scrolling through the scraps of text. That might stand for someone's initials, a manager, maybe. Could it be the same KL who was rumored to be a close associate of the board? Or was it just a coincidence? Callista saved everything to a separate folder labeled Possible Evidence, mindful that whoever had orchestrated this might notice digital footprints. She hoped Remington's internal security measures would keep her under the radar. She was so engrossed that she barely heard the soft ding of the private elevator opening. She lifted her head, heart skipping in sudden alarm. Could Remington be back so soon? The penthouse door swung open, and a tall, statuesque woman with dark, meticulously styled hair stepped through, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The newcomer wore a fitted navy dress that spoke of high corporate status, her expression severe and searching as she surveyed the penthouse interior. Callista froze. She had no idea who this was. But the woman didn't seem surprised to find someone here. Instead, her eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. "You must be Callista Montgomery," she said, her voice low and precise. "I'm Kiana Lockwood, Vice President of Public Relations at Bishop & Hayes. I'm here to speak with Remington, but apparently he's not in right now." Callista's mind scrambled. Vice President of PR, that made her a high-ranking executive, possibly close to the board. Was she a friend or foe? The mention of her name sent alarm bells ringing in Callista's head. "He stepped out for a moment," Callista replied as calmly as possible. "He should be back soon." Did you come up here alone?" Kiana ignored the question, pursing her lips as she took in the array of open files on the table. "I see you're busy reviewing internal documents. That's quite a step up from your role as an outside designer, unless, of course, this is personal business between you and Remington." Her tone dripped with condescension, as though implying there might be a romantic dimension to Callista's presence. "We're all so curious at the office about your arrangement." A flush of indignation warmed Callista's cheeks. She recognized the insinuation. People at Bishop & Hayes were likely gossiping, maybe even forging stories that she was Remington's new fling, hoping to delegitimize whatever she was doing. "I'm assisting Remington on a research project," Callista said as evenly as she could. "Given how compromised some parts of the company are, he thought I might help spot discrepancies. That's all." Kiana's eyebrow arched. "Compromised is a strong word. Is that what Remington's told you?" There was a hint of a sneer at her lips. "I'm not sure how much you know about corporate matters, Ms. Montgomery, but brand reputation is delicate. Stirring up talk of conspiracies and sabotage could do irreparable harm to Bishop & Hayes. We must ensure any accusations are backed by concrete proof." She took another step forward, gazing down at the screen, which still displayed the suspicious temp folder. You realize you're stepping into dangerous territory, yes? People are protective of the company's image. Trying to hold her ground, Callista took a slow breath. I understand. No one wants to smear the company's reputation. But if there's wrongdoing, the best way to preserve Bishop and Hayes is to root it out. She braced herself for the retort, half expecting Kiana to lash out or dismiss her. To Callista's surprise, the vice president's expression shifted from scornful to oddly grave. I see, she said, her voice dropping. She closed the distance, glancing at the screen again. Featherline Initiative. That project has been on hold for months. Why are you digging it up now? Callista hesitated. How much could she reveal? The last thing she wanted was to compromise Remington's plan or give away more than necessary. Remington suspected issues with some philanthropic initiatives, she replied cautiously. I'm just looking for any sign of irregularities. Kiana's mouth formed a thin line. She took a moment to assess Callista, as though deciding whether to share more. Finally, with a subtle shift, she said, Featherline was managed by a group of mid-level directors who no longer work here. But there was always talk of a big name behind it, someone higher up, who used those directors as a front. No one ever admitted who. If you uncover that name, you'll expose more than just financial fraud. A flicker of tension appeared on her brow. Callista's pulse quickened. Was Kiana dropping a hint, or was she trying to gauge how much Callista already knew? I appreciate the insight, she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. It might help us figure out who's pulling the strings. Kiana observed her for a lingering beat, then inclined her head in a curt nod. If Remington isn't here, I won't wait around. But tell him I came by. Let him know we need to discuss the upcoming shareholders meeting. It's crucial that we maintain a stable narrative while all these rumors fly about. Her gaze brushed over the digital files once more. Careful how you proceed, Ms. Montgomery. Sometimes, chasing the truth can make enemies you never anticipated. Before Callista could respond, Kiana turned on her heel and marched out, her footsteps echoing against the marble until the penthouse door hissed shut behind her. In the silence that followed, Callista let out a long, shaky breath, trying to process the bizarre tension of that encounter. Kiana Lockwood was formidable, someone used to controlling the corporate narrative. But she hadn't shut down Callista's investigation. If anything, she'd alluded to deeper mysteries. A swirl of anxiety tinged with excitement pooled in Callista's stomach. This was bigger than a few forged documents. If a top-level figure orchestrated Featherline's financial ruse, they could be powerful enough to manipulate the entire board, and the shady network might extend further. She thought about Kiana's warning, careful how you proceed. Was it genuine concern, or a veiled threat? She was still pondering that question when Remington returned, stepping off the elevator with a taut expression. Sorry for the delay, he began, shrugging out of his suit jacket. Had to deal with an urgent request from the building's security manager. Apparently, someone was poking around downstairs, asking about your arrival. He paused, sensing her unsettled mood. Did something happen while I was gone? Callista swallowed. Kiana Lockwood just showed up. She said she wanted to speak with you about the shareholders meeting, but I think she was really here to check on me, or check on what we're doing. Remington's face hardened. Kiana? Interesting. She's vice president of PR and very close to certain board members. How did she seem? Tense. Guarded, Callista replied. She hinted there's more to Featherline Initiative than meets the eye and warned me about how dangerous it can be to go digging. She examined his reaction, hoping he might confirm or deny her unease. Should we trust her? His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Kiana's job is to protect the company's public image. She's not someone who'd risk that for a personal crusade, but she may not be part of the conspiracy either. She plays things close to the vest. If she suspects wrongdoing, she might try to handle it internally, control the fallout. Callista sighed, running a hand through her hair. She also mentioned a big name lurking behind the scenes. Someone we haven't identified yet. If she's telling the truth, that means we're not just dealing with mid-level managers but a key executive, maybe even a board member. Remington's jaw clenched. If so, that explains why we keep hitting brick walls and tampered footage. They have the power to shut down evidence at every turn. He sank into the chair beside her, scanning the folder open on her laptop. All right, let's keep pressing on. We'll build a thorough case before we confront anyone. Once we have irrefutable proof, not even the highest executive can quash it. His conviction steadied her racing pulse, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that the clock was ticking. The conspirators wouldn't sit idle. They'd either make a final move to erase the evidence or take drastic steps to ensure Callista stayed silent forever. She shivered involuntarily, recalling the taste of the drug in her champagne, the hazy terror of being robbed of her senses. Remington noticed her tremor and, without warning, rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch grounded her. "You're safe here," he said quietly, echoing words he'd spoken that morning. "I promise." She nodded, letting out a measured breath. The tension in the room, though thick with unresolved mystery, was threaded with a closeness that was hard to ignore. In another world, another life, she might have wondered what it would be like to meet Remington Beckett under normal circumstances, to be a design consultant unveiling her creative ideas in a boardroom. But fate had thrust them into this crucible, forging a partnership built on necessity, trust, and a spark of connection neither could deny. The remainder of the day stretched on in a blur of digital detective work, scribbled notes, and quiet discussions about possible suspects. Every so often, Callista's thoughts drifted to Kiana's cryptic presence. Vice President of PR, swirling in the same labyrinth of corruption. Was she an ally, a bystander, or another hidden adversary? Late afternoon arrived, painting the city in a golden hue that filtered through the penthouse windows. Callista felt exhaustion gnaw at her, but the progress they'd made, identifying more forged timestamps, referencing the suspicious involvement of KL, cross-checking with philanthropic accounts, fueled her resolve. She and Remington paused for a break, standing side by side in front of the glass facade, watching the skyline sparkle in the sun's final rays. "Thank you for trusting me with all this," she murmured, glancing at his reflection in the window. "I'm just a designer, not a forensic accountant. Yet you've put your faith in me." He gave her a soft, almost wistful smile, eyes meeting hers in the glass reflection. "You're sharp, resourceful, and you stumbled into this mess through no fault of your own. I'm grateful you're helping me. And I trust you. Maybe more than anyone else in this company right now." Her heart fluttered. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. The city's golden light bathed them in a warm glow, magnifying the shared moment. Though they were in the midst of a corporate war of shadows, for that brief instant, Callista felt a sense of belonging she had never quite experienced before, a sense that together, they might conquer anything. And as evening slipped over Manhattan, it dawned on her that the true battle was just beginning. Early evening shadows stretched across the penthouse, turning the city lights into a glittering tapestry outside the windows. Callista pushed aside her laptop and rubbed her tired eyes. She'd spent hours sifting through endless PDFs, spreadsheets, and promotional brochures for half-baked philanthropic ventures. Her notes had grown into a small mountain of scribbles and bullet points, each one hinting at deeper layers of fraud within Bishop and Hayes. Remington, seated across the glass dining table, was similarly absorbed in phone calls, coordinating with his handful of trusted employees who were quietly digging into the suspicious accounts. Eventually, he ended a call with a heavy sigh. "That was my head of IT. He confirms the sabotage of our security systems was thorough. However, they did find a small log file that might show who accessed the servers the night you were drugged." Callista's heart leaped. "That's something concrete, right?" His expression turned guarded. Potentially. We only have partial data. It lists the user account name as KL. The same initials you found in those design placeholders. But we still have no definitive proof it's Kiana Lockwood or someone forging her credentials. My IT lead says it could be a decoy if someone is trying to shift blame. Callista recalled Kiana Lockwood's chilly visit earlier. The vice president of PR had dropped hints that there was a bigger name pulling the strings behind the scenes. Could she herself be that figure? Or was she just another player dancing around the edges, as uncertain of the truth as they were? A tangle of questions swirled in Callista's mind, fueling both suspicion and a faint glimmer of hope that they were inching closer to the truth. She glanced at Remington's taut posture and knew he was thinking the same thing. If it's really Kiana, we have to confront her, she said quietly. But if it's a setup, someone forging her login, this might be exactly what the true culprit wants. He nodded, drumming his fingers on the table's polished surface. Tomorrow morning, the shareholders meet for an informal briefing ahead of the next big board session. Kiana will be there, and so will the entire upper management. They'll want to address the rumor mill about you, me, and these so-called missing funds. His gaze flicked to Callista. I have to make a statement, but if I go in guns blazing without airtight proof, the conspirators could turn the tide against us. Her pulse quickened. Then we need more. Something that nails them so completely they can't spin it. Maybe we approach Kiana discreetly, see if she'll give us anything more about the deeper powers involved. Or we keep investigating on our own until we have an undeniable paper trail. He rose from his seat, pacing across the marble floor. Kiana might talk if she's not complicit. She hinted at wanting to protect the company from public scandal. But if she's part of this, we'd be walking into a trap. And the last thing I want is for you to face another threat. He halted by the window, shoulders tense, the glow of streetlights tracing sharp lines across his face. Callista stood too, drawn by the concern etched in his features. She approached him carefully, until only a breath of space separated them. I'm willing to take that risk, she murmured, her heart pounding. You said it yourself, I stumbled into this. I can't just run away when it matters. If we do nothing, they might bury evidence or worse. Another innocent person could get hurt. Remington's gaze locked onto hers, a swirl of frustration and admiration in his eyes. This is so far beyond what you should have to deal with, he said softly. You're a designer, not a corporate detective. Yet you've handled it all with more resilience than anyone I know. Heat flared in her chest. She swallowed, torn between the urgency of their mission and an undeniable pull toward him she felt whenever their eyes met. The intensity of that moment made her heart twist with conflicting emotions. It's not like I have much choice, she managed, voice faltering. Someone tried to drug me, possibly kill me. I can't pretend life is normal. His expression softened. He lifted a hand, tentatively brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The lightest touch, yet it sent a ripple of warmth through her that was impossible to ignore. No, he agreed, voice low. Neither can I. For several beats, they stood there, the hush of the penthouse wrapping around them like a thin veil. Outside the window, the city thrummed with life, but in that instant it felt distant. With a slight tilt of his head, Remington leaned in, pausing just inches from her lips as though seeking permission. Callista's breath caught, she closed her eyes and let the tension unfurl. Their lips brushed in a gentle, tentative kiss, an unspoken promise in the midst of danger. The moment lasted only a heartbeat before they slowly broke apart, reality rushing back in. The adrenaline of their investigation still hummed in Callista's veins, but the warmth of that shared connection added a new, complex layer to everything they faced. Neither spoke, the silence conveying what words could not, that in the swirl of corporate machinations and dark secrets, they had found a spark of something real. Eventually, Remington stepped back, clearing his throat. A faint flush colored his cheeks, and she caught the hint of a sheepish smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sorry, he began awkwardly, I didn't plan that. She mirrored his shy smile. Me neither. But I don't regret it. He was quiet for a moment, as though turning over her response. Nor do I, he said at last. His eyes lingered on her face a second longer before he exhaled and forced himself to return to the immediate crisis. In any case, let's keep our focus. I want to see if we can glean anything else from the design metadata you found. Maybe there's a lead on the staff who originally submitted the project proposals for Featherline. We'll cross-reference that with the server logs around KL's username. She followed him back to the table, heart still fluttering from the kiss. Part of her wanted to revel in the warmth of that moment, but the other part knew they were racing a ticking clock. The conspirators wouldn't wait for them to piece everything together. They might strike again at any time, especially with the shareholders' meeting imminent. They spent the next few hours chasing every digital breadcrumb, old internal memos from the philanthropic division, sign-off forms featuring a suspicious signature that matched no known staff, and ID badges used to access certain secure printing stations. All of it painted a picture of a small faction within Bishop and Hayes that had systematically hidden its tracks, until Callista's accidental eavesdropping forced them to escalate. Sometime after midnight, a beep sounded from Remington's phone. He grabbed it, scanning the screen. His brow furrowed, and he turned the display for Callista to see an anonymous text. The message read, "Stay out of what doesn't concern you. She was just a warning. Next time, you both fall." Her stomach lurched. She was just a warning had to mean Callista, she had been the warning. The text was a direct threat to Remington as well, suggesting their unknown enemy had eyes everywhere, even at this late hour. Fury and fear tangled in her chest. They're trying to scare us. Force us to back down. Remington set his jaw. Then they miscalculated. His tone was steel. He tapped out a quick message to his security detail, instructing them to trace the number if possible, and also amping up their overnight watch. We won't be bullied into silence, Callista. She drew closer to read the venomous words again, adrenaline heightening her senses. They confirmed we're on the right track, she said, swallowing hard. They're lashing out because they sense we could expose them. He wrapped a reassuring arm around her shoulders, glancing at the windows as though expecting to see a sniper's scope. We'll keep pushing. But we need to be ready for tomorrow's meeting. It might be our best chance to force them into the light, or at least gather new intel. She nodded against the roaring in her ears. I'll see if I can compile a concise set of evidence for you to use in a private conversation with Kiana. If she's not the culprit, she might help us corner whoever is. That decided, they parted ways for the night, Remington retiring to his bedroom, while Callista claimed the guest suite again. In the quiet stillness, as she lay in the plush bed and stared at the darkened ceiling, her mind churned with conflicting thoughts. The day's discoveries, the looming threat, that stolen kiss. It all blurred into a single pulse of tension and longing. She clung to the memory of his warmth, that fleeting sense of safety in his arms, even as malicious forces swirled just beyond the penthouse walls. Sleep came slowly. Each time she drifted off, she jolted awake with visions of the men in the gala, their sinister whispers echoing. She pictured them tampering with the servers, forging signatures, lurking in the labyrinth of corporate hallways. But eventually, exhaustion won out, and she succumbed to a restless slumber, fueled by the hope that tomorrow would bring them one step closer to unmasking the conspirators, and ensuring that neither she nor Remington would be forced into the shadows again. Callista awoke to the sound of her phone's alarm, an old habit from her freelance days, though she'd barely slept. She blinked in the morning light spilling through the guest suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling a knot of dread coil in her stomach. Today was the informal shareholders' meeting, the one that might redefine everything. She threw back the covers and steeled herself, telling her reflection in the mirror that she had no choice, she would help Remington expose the conspiracy or risk succumbing to it herself. She made her way to the kitchen area, finding Remington already there, nursing a cup of coffee and scrolling through updates on his tablet. He looked sharp in a charcoal suit, but fatigue underlined his features, a hint of worry casting shadows in his eyes. Still, he managed a half-smile when he saw her. "Morning," he said, voice low. "We've got a few hours before the shareholders gather. I had my assistant deliver a set of clothes for you, something appropriate in case you decide to come with me." Callista's gaze flicked to a garment bag hanging on a nearby chair. She felt a rush of gratitude and apprehension. "I appreciate it," she murmured. "I haven't quite decided if I should be there. Won't it paint a target on me?" He hesitated, setting his mug down. "It might. But if we keep you hidden away, the conspirators could spin more rumors about you. And if Kiana Lockwood, or anyone else in that meeting, has answers, your presence might pressure them to come clean, or slip up. Then again, I won't force you. This is dangerous." She looked into his eyes, remembering how the men behind Featherline had tampered with footage and threatened them. It felt like a leap off a cliff, but perhaps a necessary one. "I'll be safer by your side than here alone," she finally said. "And we need to show them we're not intimidated. That text we got last night was an attempt to rattle us." A grim smile ghosted across his lips. "Then we stand together." He tapped his tablet, pulling up a digital file marked "for meeting." "I've prepared a confidential summary of the anomalies we found. I plan to share it only with specific board members I trust. If you spot anyone who reacts suspiciously, we'll know they're involved." Callista nodded, her pulse thudding in her ears. "And if they retaliate? Then we'll have the entire boardroom as witnesses," he replied. "No matter how powerful they think they are, they can't just snuff us out in front of everyone. Plus, I'm calling in extra security, my personal detail will be there." A flicker of warmth lit his eyes as he added, "No one's laying a finger on you today." She swallowed, touched by his protectiveness. On the table, a single coffee mug waited for her. She took a sip, letting the warmth soothe her frayed nerves. "Let's do it, then. We can't keep looking over our shoulders forever." By the time they arrived at Bishop and Hayes headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper of steel and glass, the building hummed with subdued tension. The upper floors were off-limits to most employees this morning, reserved for the shareholders' gathering, and discreet guards stationed near the elevator bank nodded upon seeing Remington. Callista stayed close to him, heart pounding as they ascended to the executive lounge. As soon as the elevator doors slid open, they were greeted by a handful of well-dressed individuals milling about, some older men in tailored suits, a few women in business casual attire, all exchanging cautious pleasantries. Whispers rose at the sight of Callista stepping out with Remington. She forced her shoulders back, refusing to wilt under their stares. Kiana Lockwood stood by the large windows, a coffee cup in hand. Her posture stiffened visibly at their approach. She wore a crisp cream-colored blazer, her expression unreadable. But she gave a terse nod when Remington introduced Callista formally, calling her a consultant assisting with certain investigations. An almost imperceptible flicker darkened Kiana's eyes, as if she was trying to decide if Callista was friend or foe. They didn't have long to dwell on the tension, because another figure approached, a lean, silver-haired man with a polished smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Remington," he greeted, voice cool. "I trust you've got interesting updates for us today. The rumor mill's been turning at full speed." "Mr. Faraday," Remington acknowledged, introducing Callista with measured politeness. "We'll address all rumors in the session." Faraday's gaze flickered over Callista, then back to Remington. "I'm looking forward to hearing an official statement." He strolled off, leaving a faint chill in the air. Callista watched him go, feeling an odd sense of foreboding. She glanced at Remington, who sighed quietly. "That's Alan Faraday. One of the more influential shareholders, and rumored to have private dealings in half the major corporations around Manhattan. Keep an eye on him, he has a talent for reading people and twisting narratives. They drifted through the lounge, exchanging terse nods with other stakeholders. Some were cryptically polite, others openly curious about Callista's presence. She was acutely aware of the hush that fell each time she stepped near a conversation. Still, no one confronted her outright, until a tall, striking man with olive skin and wavy dark hair cut across her path. "You're the infamous Ms. Montgomery," he said, offering a theatrical bow. "Raphael DeSantis, part of the board's finance committee. Heard all sorts of rumors, that you're a whistleblower, or maybe Beckett's new muse. Which is it?" Callista's cheeks burned. "I'm here to uncover the truth about certain philanthropic discrepancies," she replied evenly. "If you want clarity, I suggest you attend the meeting." DeSantis chuckled in a low, mocking way. "Feisty. Good luck. The ones behind these discrepancies don't play nice." She set her jaw. "I'm not backing down." She caught a fleeting smile from Remington, who gently guided her away, effectively ending the exchange. Nerves churned in her stomach. Between Faraday, Kiana, DeSantis, and the unknown conspirators, the lounge felt like a viper's pit. Moments later, the boardroom doors opened, and a distinguished woman in a pinstripe dress gestured them inside. Callista's heart hammered as they filed into a sleek conference space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Seated around the oval table were the most powerful figures in Bishop and Hayes, men and women who could make or break fortunes with a single signature. A hush settled as Remington took a seat at the head, indicating for Callista to sit beside him. Kiana, Faraday, DeSantis, and half a dozen others arranged themselves around the table, each wearing an inscrutable expression. The tension was palpable, like a storm gathering beneath polished etiquette. Remington wasted no time. In a steady, resonant voice, he welcomed everyone, then dove straight into the pressing topic. "It's come to my attention that a number of philanthropic initiatives are under review for possible financial irregularities." A murmur went through the room, some feigning surprise, others exchanging wary looks. Callista clenched her fists in her lap to stop them from shaking. She'd never addressed so many powerful people before, and the gravitas of the moment weighed on her. Still, she kept her chin high. When Remington gestured for her to speak, she exhaled and mustered her courage. She briefly explained the design discrepancies she'd discovered, misaligned dates, suspicious metadata, while carefully omitting details that might endanger them if the conspirators learned how much evidence they possessed. She could feel the temperature in the room drop. Some board members frowned in apparent confusion, a few sneered. DeSantis tapped a pen against the table, looking amused. Kiana's brows knit, her posture rigid, though she didn't interrupt. When Callista finished, Remington picked up the thread, presenting a handful of sanitized slides that summarized the philanthropic red flags. The hush grew. She scanned the faces around the table, trying to detect flickers of guilt or alarm. A few looked genuinely concerned. Others remained stoic, indifferent. Finally, Faraday leaned forward. "Remington, are you implying someone here is complicit in laundering money through these charities?" "That's a serious accusation." Remington locked eyes with him. "I'm suggesting we have enough anomalies to warrant a deeper investigation. We can't overlook the possibility that high-level staff are involved." A ripple of tension traveled through the group. Kiana's lips parted as if to speak, but she hesitated. Then she said, her tone clipped, "I agree that transparency is essential. But we must be cautious about casting suspicion without solid evidence. Rumors can harm us all if they reach the public prematurely." "We understand the need for discretion," Callista ventured softly, aware she was stepping into a minefield. "But people's lives are at risk. We've seen intimidation tactics already." DeSantis smirked. "You're referencing your alleged drugging, Ms. Montgomery. Word is you might be exaggerating." Callista's pulse spiked. She opened her mouth to retort, but Remington beat her to it, tone icy. We found partial footage showing a man tampering with her drink. We have logs of someone accessing secure servers to erase more conclusive evidence. This is not exaggeration, DeSantis. A momentary flash of alarm crossed DeSantis's features, then vanished behind a sardonic expression. Then, by all means, provide a name. Or is your evidence incomplete? Before Remington could respond, the boardroom doors burst open, and in rushed a security officer, out of breath. "Apologies, sir," he said, eyes darting uneasily around the table. "We have a situation in the server room. Someone triggered an unauthorized transfer of data offsite. We're locking it down now." The atmosphere in the room tensed like a drawn bowstring. "Who's behind it?" Remington demanded, voice harsh. The guard shook his head, unsure. Then the phone of nearly every board member began to buzz or chime with incoming alerts. Confusion reigned as they reached for devices or turned to each other in hushed conversation. A swirl of panic built in the center of the table. Callista's mind raced. This had to be the conspirators making their move, sabotaging the last remnants of evidence or stealing crucial data before it could be discovered. She glanced at Kiana Lockwood, whose face had gone pale, and realized the woman looked genuinely startled. Faraday shot to his feet, phone in hand, brow furrowed in apparent anger. "What do you mean an unauthorized transfer? Remington, is this another of your stunts?" A hush fell as the security officer repeated that it was real, not a drill or decoy. With the board members distracted, Remington caught Callista's eye. His expression was equal parts anger and resolve, as if to say, "This is it, the conspirators are making their final play." Without waiting for formalities, Remington turned to the group, voice carrying over the clamor. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need an immediate lockdown of all systems. I suggest we suspend this meeting and secure the building. Whoever is orchestrating this data theft is the same party behind the bogus charities and Ms. Montgomery's assault. If any of you have knowledge that could help, now's the time to speak." A tense silence followed. Some looked outraged by his directness, others uncertain. Kiana's gaze darted to the phone in her hand, then to Remington. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then pressed her lips together in a pained decision. Finally, she said in a low voice, "There's a name that's come up in certain channels I monitor. K.L. If you found that in the server logs, it's not me. But I suspect I know who it belongs to." All eyes turned on her. The tension was a living thing in the boardroom, crackling with the potential to detonate everything. Callista's breath caught. Kiana, the real KL or not, was about to confess something big. Before she could speak, another guard rushed in, announcing they had a suspect pinned in the server room. Remington took a step back from the table, gesturing for Callista to stay close. "Take me there," he ordered, voice taut with adrenaline. Board members shouted questions, but he ignored them. Callista's stomach churned with anticipation, a wild sense of fear and excitement surging through her veins. She could hardly believe how quickly their careful plan had erupted into crisis. As they strode from the boardroom, Kiana following in their wake, Callista caught a glimpse of Faraday and DeSantis exchanging rapid, tense whispers. Were they implicated or just panicking? She couldn't tell. Her only certainty was that the truth was closer than ever, and that the building lockdown might be the catalyst that forced every secret into the open. She shot Remington a quick, resolute look. He returned it with silent confidence, his hand lightly brushing her arm to steady her. Whatever they found in that server room, whoever they unmasked, would either confirm their suspicions or throw them into deeper chaos. And as the elevator doors slid closed, carrying them downward, Callista gripped the side rail with clammy palms, steeling herself for the next explosive reveal. Callista's pulse hammered in her ears as the elevator descended to the sublevel server room, the tension palpable in the small cabin. Remington stood beside her, jaw tight, while Kiana Lockwood hovered near the back, her expression set with uncharacteristic anxiety. They were flanked by two security officers who remained silent, weapons at the ready in case they faced a violent confrontation. When the doors slid open, the corridor lights flickered ominously, reflecting the partial lockdown of the building systems. A third guard stood at the double doors leading to the server hub, his face grim. "We have someone cornered in there," he reported in a low voice. "They initiated a massive data transfer to an off-site server, but we severed the link. Got their ID card flagged. Name's Chris Lindstrom. Claims they were ordered to do it." He paused, glancing at Kiana. "But we're not sure who gave the order." Kiana's brow furrowed. "Chris Lindstrom. KL, she said quietly, as though finally confirming a suspicion. "He's from PR's data analytics team." "I never realized." Remington nodded. "So he's the actual KL we've seen in the logs? That might explain the sabotage." His gaze flicked to Callista. "Stay behind me," he murmured. She swallowed and followed, heart pounding. They entered the server room, where rows of towering computer racks hummed with LED lights in shades of green and red. Crouched near a console was a slim, bespectacled man, hands raised in surrender under the watchful eye of another armed guard. Despite the fear etched across his face, he looked more panicked than ruthless, a cornered technician rather than a hardened conspirator. Remington approached, shoulders set with authority. "Chris Lindstrom. You work under Kiana's PR analysis division, correct?" The man swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, Mr. Beckett. I'm sorry. They forced my hand." Callista stepped closer, still maintaining a prudent distance. Kiana hovered at the edge of the circle, crossing her arms. "Who forced you?" she demanded sharply. "If you're part of a conspiracy, now's the time to come clean." Chris's eyes flickered with desperation. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. But they threatened me. Said if I didn't erase certain records and funnel philanthropic funds into new accounts, they'd frame me for embezzlement. I'm just the data guy, I didn't realize they were drugging people." His voice cracked, glancing at Callista as though recognizing her from the swirling rumors. Remington's tone turned hard. "Give us names. Or are you going to hide behind half-truths? We've had enough of this. Files have been forged, footage tampered with, and a woman was nearly killed to protect someone's secret." A flicker of guilt flashed across Chris's features. It was Alan Faraday and Rafael DeSantis. He exhaled a shaky breath, voice trembling. "They're the real architects behind Featherline. They roped in mid-level managers, made them sign off on non-existent charities, forging sign-offs when needed. They used my access to bury the evidence. And when you, Miss Montgomery, overheard something at the gala, they panicked, said you had to be taken out of the picture." Callista felt her stomach twist. "So they orchestrated the drugging?" Chris nodded miserably. "Yes. They told me it was a mild sedative, but obviously it was something stronger. I never wanted to be complicit in that. It's just, they had so much leverage. I was afraid." A thick silence fell. Callista closed her eyes, relief and rage swirling in equal measure. They had names, concrete accusations. Alan Faraday, the poised, influential shareholder who had seemed almost bored with the conspiracy talk, and Rafael DeSantis, whose mocking grin belied a dangerous cunning. Kiana let out a slow breath, her posture deflating. "Faraday's been forging deals for years, probably. And DeSantis has held a seat on the finance committee, giving him direct oversight of philanthropic spending. Now it all makes sense, why we kept hitting walls, why the server logs pointed to KL. They used you as a pawn, Chris." Remington signaled the guards. "Take Lindstrom into protective custody. If he cooperates fully, we'll ensure the authorities know he was coerced. But first," he broke off, grabbing the technician by the shoulder. "You have all the data? Everything that ties Faraday and DeSantis to this?" Chris nodded vigorously. Yes. It's on that external drive over there. He motioned to a sleek device plugged into the console. They wanted me to wipe the local servers and upload everything to an offshore domain, so they could control what evidence existed. But I cut the upload short when security locked the system. The local files should show the entire scheme. Remington caught Callista's eye, a spark of triumph in his gaze. We've got them, he said quietly. Once we turn this over to law enforcement, the board can't ignore it. Callista swallowed her relief, her pulse still racing. We need to move fast. Faraday and DeSantis will realize something's gone wrong. They might try to flee or destroy more evidence. He nodded, grim determination on his face. We'll confront them before they can slip away. Kiana, rally the board members. I want them in the conference room now, I'm calling an emergency session. Kiana, though clearly shaken, gave a curt nod and hurried out, phone already in hand. As the guards led Chris Lindstrom away, Remington turned to Callista, expression gentling. You all right? She inhaled shakily. Yes. Just. I can't believe it was them all along. Faraday, DeSantis, they seemed so polished. She recalled DeSantis's smirk, Faraday's cool regard. But it makes sense. They had the reach and the resources. He placed a comforting hand against her upper arm, his thumb brushing lightly. We'll make sure they answer for it. Let's go. They returned to the upper floor boardroom, where confusion reigned. Half the shareholders were talking in urgent knots, and hush fell when Remington strode in. Callista felt every eye snap to her, but she lifted her chin, determined. Kiana stood by the door, looking grim. Faraday and DeSantis loitered near the window, exchanging quick whispers that stilled at Remington's approach. Ladies and gentlemen, Remington began, voice resonating through the room. We have uncovered decisive evidence tying 2 members of this board to major fraud and attempted murder. A collective gasp sounded. He held up the external drive Chris had indicated. This device and the testimony of our IT staffer, Chris Lindstrom, detail how philanthropic accounts were siphoned into personal slush funds, how footage was erased, and how certain individuals orchestrated Ms. Montgomery's drugging. We have names. We have timestamps. And we have their coded transactions. DeSantis opened his mouth to protest, but Alan Faraday spoke first, voice dripping with controlled fury. This is slander, Beckett. If you think you can wave around a hack drive to pin your failings on us, you're mistaken. Remington's stare was unyielding. You're welcome to deny it. But the data is clear. The authorities are on their way to confirm. Surrender your devices and cooperate, or we'll proceed without you. A ripple of panic flicked over DeSantis's features. Faraday stood straighter, regaining some composure. Ridiculous. I'll have my lawyers. Before he could finish, uniformed officers from city law enforcement arrived, escorted by the building's security detail. The lead detective stepped forward, flashing a badge. We have a warrant to seize any relevant electronics and documentation. Mr. Beckett gave us probable cause. Gentlemen, I suggest you stand aside. Murmurs and gasps filled the boardroom. Some members pulled back, aghast, others glared at Faraday and DeSantis in betrayal. Kiana Lockwood stood off to one side, face pale but resolute. Callista realized that, despite Kiana's self-interest in protecting the company's image, she'd quietly aided them by facilitating the police entry. DeSantis spun on Callista, eyes dark with loathing. You little, we would have been fine if not for your meddling. A guard blocked his path before he could lunge closer. Rage contorted his features. We gave you a chance to keep your mouth shut. Fear fluttered through her, but she stood firm. You tried to destroy me with a drug drink, she replied, voice steady. No regrets here. Alan Faraday sneered, shaking his head. This is a fiasco, Beckett. You've doomed the company to scandal. Remington let out a harsh laugh. Don't lecture me about scandal, Faraday. You and your accomplices dragged us into this. Now the truth sees the light. That's all I care about. As the detectives began collecting laptops and searching desks, the tension gradually ebbed. Faraday and DeSantis, faced with damning evidence, had no option but to comply, though their expressions promised legal battles ahead. Board members watched in stunned silence while police methodically documented every suspicious file. Kiana eased away from the chaos, offering Callista a fleeting, almost sympathetic glance before turning to manage the damage control on phone calls. Finally, Remington stepped aside with Callista, a swirl of relief and weariness in his stance. It's done, he said quietly, though he cast a wary look at DeSantis and Faraday, who were being questioned by an officer. We'll have to endure some negative press, but at least the rod is excised. And you're free now. No more threats. She let out a shaky exhale, adrenaline draining. Thank you, she whispered. For believing me, for protecting me. His gaze gentled, that familiar warmth surfacing behind the steel. You saved yourself too, Callista. Without your tenacity, I doubt we'd have pinned them so thoroughly. Their eyes held, a sense of finality mingling with gratitude. The memory of the kiss they'd shared hovered in her mind, a stark contrast to the corporate battlefield around them. Despite everything, a fragile smile touched her lips. So, what now? He offered a lopsided grin. We'll brace for the fallout, cooperate with the investigation, reassure shareholders that the company can rebuild trust. Then his tone softened, a personal note creeping in. And maybe, once the dust settles, you and I see where this connection leads. Without conspiracies looming. Her cheeks warmed. I'd like that. A lot. A flicker of a chuckle escaped him. They both turned as an officer walked over, wanting a statement from Remington. Callista stepped back, letting him handle official duties, her heart buoyed by relief and cautious hope. The immediate threat was defanged, though legal skirmishes would inevitably follow. Yet she was safe, her name cleared, and, in a twist beyond anything she'd ever imagined, the CEO of Bishop and Hayes had become not just her protector, but someone she might genuinely care for. She surveyed the boardroom one last time, a scene of subdued chaos, corporate suits in heated discussions, police collecting final evidence, and a sense that a dark era had just been pulled into the light. The hush inside Callista's chest spoke of an ending, and the promise of a new beginning. Hours later, she found herself returning to the penthouse by Remington's side, the evening sun painting the cityscape in hues of pink and gold. The tension still hummed from the day's events, but it felt like a victory march rather than a retreat. At the door, he paused, turning to face her. Stay here a while longer, he suggested softly, until we're sure no stragglers from that conspiracy intend to seek revenge. I have an excellent bottle of wine stashed somewhere, thought you might want to celebrate not being a target anymore. Callista pressed her lips into a slight grin. I'd love that. But first, maybe I'll get out of these corporate clothes. She glanced down at the tailored outfit he'd provided, so different from her usual casual style. He laughed gently. Yes, of course. Be comfortable. This is home for as long as you need. Her heart clenched at the word home, a swirl of warmth blossoming. She thought back to waking up in his shirt, uncertain and terrified, never imagining it would lead them to unveiling a multimillion-dollar fraud, and forging a bond. Yet here they were, ready to embrace whatever came next. As she stepped into the penthouse living area, the city lights began twinkling on, one by one, like a promise of hope. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Callista breathed without fear, excitement nudging her mind. Beyond the wreckage of conspiracies and near catastrophe, a fresh path lay open, one where she could create a future not defined by terror or secrecy, but by trust, ambition, and, perhaps, love.